Hello, everyone. Hello, sister. Um, I see my beautiful sister. You guys can't see her right now, but you will in a minute. She's waving. So here we are. It's time for Bible Study Live. We're back on Facebook this week. Sorry, last week I couldn't get it together. I had to go live on YouTube. So we're doing our theme in August of wisdom, learning, and experience in the Bible. And tonight we're talking about the wisdom of Solomon. So it's not just the wisdom of Solomon, though. It's more like Solomon's journey with wisdom, because he starts out real well. And then when we study him a little further, we find he didn't end quite so well. So we're going to start with 1 Kings chapter 3. So turn with me, if you will, to 1 Kings chapter 3. All right. There's my other sister Spring coming in. So 1 Kings chapter 3 says, Solomon made an alliance with Pharaoh, king of Egypt, and married his daughter. He brought her to the city of David until he finished building his palace and the temple of the Lord and the wall around Jerusalem. The people, however, were still sacrificing at the high places because a temple had not yet been built for the name of the Lord. And that's interesting. They say built for the name of the Lord, and name is capitalized. Solomon showed his love for the Lord by walking according to the statutes of his father David, except that he offered sacrifices and burned incense on the high places. The king went to Gibeon to offer sacrifices, for that was the most important high place. And Solomon offered 1,000 burnt offerings on that altar. At Gibeon, the Lord appeared to Solomon during the night in a dream. And again, this is one of those things that from our study, when Solomon asked for wisdom, many of us weren't taught that it happened in a dream. So it's interesting to just reread this again, and we're reading it in a different context. So the Lord appeared to Solomon during the night in a dream, and God said, ask for whatever you want me to give you. Solomon answered, you have shown great kindness to your servant, my father David, because he was faithful to you and righteous and upright in heart. You have continued this great kindness to him and have given him a son to sit on the throne this very day. Now, O Lord my God, you have made your servant king in place of my father David, but I am only a little child and do not know how to carry out my duties. That's great humility. Your servant is here among the people you have chosen, a great people, too numerous to count or number. So give your servant a discerning heart to govern your people and to distinguish between right and wrong. For who is able to govern this great people of yours? Let me move this up a little bit so I can see a little higher. The Lord was pleased that Solomon had asked for this. So God said to him, since you have asked for this, and not for long life or wealth for yourself, nor have asked for the death of your enemies, but for discernment in administering justice, I will do what you have asked. I will give you a wise and discerning heart, so that there will never have been anyone like you, nor will there ever be. Moreover, love that word. I never get to use that in a sentence. Moreover, I will give you what you have not asked for, both riches and honor, so that in your lifetime, you will have no equal among kings. And I want to point that out. It says so that in your lifetime, because people talk about, oh, Solomon was the richest man who ever lived and the richest man who will ever live. But that's not what scripture says. Scripture, the wisdom, yes, there will be no one like you before or since, ever. Wisdom. But when it comes to riches and honor, so that in your lifetime, you will have no equal among kings. And listen to this caveat. And if you walk in my ways and obey my statutes and commands, as David your father did, I will give you a long life. Then Solomon awoke, and he realized it had been a dream. He returned to Jerusalem, stood before the ark of the Lord's covenant, and sacrificed burnt offerings and fellowship offerings, which are also called peace offerings. Then he gave a feast for all his court. This is verse 16 of chapter 3 of 1 Kings. Now, 2 prostitutes came to the king and stood before him. One of them said, "My lord, this woman and I, live in the same house. I had a baby while she was there with me. The 3rd day after my child was born, this woman also had a baby. We were alone. There was no one in the house but the 2 of us. During the night, this woman's son died because she lay on it. So she got up in the, she wanted to say that. Let me go, not digress. So she got up in the middle of the night and took my son from my side while I, your servant, was asleep. She put him by her breast and put her dead son by my breast. The next morning, I got up to nurse my son and he was dead. But when I looked at him closely in the morning light, I saw that it wasn't the son I had born." The other woman said, "No, the living one is my son. The dead one is yours." But the first one insisted, "No, the dead one is yours. The living one is mine." And so they argued before the king. The king said, "This one says, my son is alive and your son is dead, while that one says, no, your son is dead and mine is alive." Then the king said, "Bring me a sword." So they brought a sword for the king. He then gave an order, "Cut the living child in 2 and give half to one and half to the other." The woman whose son was alive was filled with compassion for her son and said to the king, "Please, my lord, give her the living baby. Don't kill him." But the other said, "Neither I nor you shall have him. Cut him in 2. Then the king gave his ruling. "Give the living baby to the first woman. Do not kill him. She is his mother." When all Israel heard the verdict the king had given, they held the king in awe because they saw that he had wisdom from God to administer justice. So the first woman was telling the truth. So that's 1 Kings. That's the full chapter of 1 Kings. Now look at 1 Kings chapter 4. The Bible speaks a little bit more about Solomon's wisdom. So verses 29 through 34. Chapter 4 of 1 Kings, verses 29 through 34. God gave Solomon wisdom and very great insight, and a breadth of understanding as measureless as the sand on the seashore. Solomon's wisdom was greater than the wisdom of all the men of the East, and greater than all the wisdom of Egypt. He was wiser than any other man, including Ethan, the Ezrahite, who must have been pretty wise that they listed him out, right? Wiser than Heman, Calcol, and Darda, the sons of Mahal. I don't even know those guys, but those 4, Ethan, Heman, Calcol, and Darda, must have been really wise because they're literally specified. Not only was he wise, he was wiser than those 4. That's a pretty cool thing. And his fame spread to all the surrounding nations. He spoke 3,000 proverbs, and his songs numbered 1,005. He described, listen to this, I'd never read this before tonight. He described plant life, from the cedar of Lebanon to the hyssop that grows out of walls. He also taught about animals and birds, reptiles and fish. I'd not ever heard that before. Men of all nations came to listen to Solomon's wisdom, sent by all the kings of the world who had heard of his wisdom. So that was a new, 5 chapters or 5 verses for me about how he was describing, just imagine, he was like a scientist. He could talk about, I'm not even wise enough to tell you what they're called. So he can talk about things that grow and about animals and, plants and all of those things. He was wise, telling this is how this works, is what this does, all the things. Now look at chapter 10, verses 1 through 13. And this is just, kind of one of my favorite chapters because they talk about the Queen of Sheba. And so I've always heard that the Queen of Sheba was a Black woman. I don't know if that's true or not, but clearly she's a woman. And so it's really cool that we read a lot about kings in First Kings, of course, but we read a lot about the kings, and the queens we hear about kind of secondarily to their king. So I mean, Esther's a little bit different, but we hear about her in the context of her becoming a queen because of her, you know, the king, Xerxes. But the Queen of Sheba, I don't know who her husband is. This doesn't say. So when you're reading it, chapter 10, verses 1 through 13, I just found it pretty powerful. When the Queen of Sheba heard about the fame of Solomon and his relation to the name of the Lord, she came to test him with hard questions. Arriving at Jerusalem with a very great caravan, with camels carrying spices, large quantities of gold, and precious stones, she came to Solomon and talked with him about all that she had on her mind. This is pretty cool. I wish we had these people still. We just call those people who have all the wisdom. And just, I mean, we have the Holy Spirit and we can talk to him, but to go travel someplace where God has imparted that kind of wisdom and just be able to sit at their feet and just ask everything that you've ever wondered. It's just pretty awesome. And granted, I ask a lot of questions. So, you know, it's maybe just awesome to me. Anyway, so it says that she talked with him about all that she had on her mind. Solomon answered all her questions. Nothing was too hard for the king to explain to her. When the Queen of Sheba saw all the wisdom of Solomon and the palace he had built, the food on his table, the seating of his officials, the attending servants in their robes, his cupbearers, and the burnt offerings he made at the temple of the Lord, she was overwhelmed. She said to the king, "The report I heard in my own country about your achievements and your wisdom is true. But I did not believe these things until I came and saw with my own eyes. Indeed, not even half was told to me." Don't you love exceeding expectations? When they say, you know, I heard good stuff, it's not even half of what's true. What an honor. So let's see, not even half was told to me. In wisdom and wealth, you have far exceeded the report I heard. How happy your men must be. How happy your officials who continually stand before you and hear your wisdom. Like imagine, like your whole team, you must have the happiest team. They just get to be right there listening to your wisdom. Praise be to the Lord your God, who has delighted in you and placed you on the throne of Israel. Because of the Lord's eternal love for Israel, he has made you king to maintain justice and righteousness. And she gave the king 120 talents, which is about 4.5 tons of gold, large quantities of spices and precious stones. Never again were so many spices brought in as those the Queen of Sheba gave to King Solomon. Hiram's ships brought gold from Ophir, and from there they brought great cargoes of elmug wood, which, you know, I need him to tell me what that is. It says elmug wood, but it says probably a variant of elgum wood. So we don't know if that was typo or just a variant. To make supports for the temple of the Lord and for the royal palace, and to make harps and lyres for the musicians. So much elmug wood has never been imported or seen since that day. King Solomon gave the Queen of Sheba all she desired and asked for, besides what he had given her out of his royal bounty. Then she left and returned with her retinue to her own country. Jean, you're gonna have to tell me about retinue. I read that word and I'm like, dang, that's a word I'm supposed to know. So retinue, when you get a chance in the chat, retinue, R-E-T-I-N-U-E. Last chapter verses that we're gonna read. I mean, he was this wise, right? And it talks about he had taken a wife and things were going well with his wife and all of that. and the wisdom. His people were amazed. People were coming from all over the world to hear him speak. And then chapter 11 begins this way. King Solomon, however, that's just not a good sign. King Solomon, however, and in King James Version, it says, but King Solomon, and the next words, loved many foreign women besides Pharaoh's daughter, Moabites, Ammonites, Edomites, Sidonians, and Hittites. Now, in the other one, it says, but King Solomon loved many strange women. That's how it says it in King James Version. But he loved many foreign women besides Pharaoh's daughter, which was, if he could have just held it together, literally. They were from nations about which the Lord had told the Israelites, you must not intermarry with them, because they will surely turn your hearts after their gods. Nevertheless, Solomon held fast to them in love. Thanks, sister. I'll read in a moment. He had 700 wives of royal birth and 300 concubines, and his wives led him astray. As Solomon grew old, his wives turned his heart after other gods, and his heart was not fully devoted to the Lord his God, as the heart of David his father had been. He followed Ashtoreth, the goddess of the Sidonians, and Moloch, the detestable god of the Ammonites. So Solomon did evil in the eyes of the Lord. He did not follow the Lord completely, as David his father had done. On a hill east of Jerusalem, Solomon built a high place for Shamash, the detestable god of Moab, and for Moloch, the detestable god of the Ammonites. He did the same for all his foreign wives, who burned incense and offered sacrifices to their gods. The Lord became angry with Solomon because his heart had turned away from the Lord, the God of Israel, who had appeared to him twice. Although he had forbidden Solomon to follow other gods, Solomon did not keep the Lord's command. So the Lord said to Solomon, since this is your attitude, that's, I don't want to hear God say that. Those are words I don't ever want to hear. Please, Lord, speak to me quickly so that I don't ever have to hear you say, since this is your attitude and you have not kept my covenant and my decrees, which I commanded you, I will most certainly tear the kingdom away from you and give it to one of your subordinates. Nevertheless, for the sake of David, your father, I will not do it during your lifetime. I will tear it out of the hand of your son. Yet I will not tear the whole kingdom from him, but will give him one tribe for the sake of David, my servant, and for the sake of Jerusalem, which I have chosen. He had all that wisdom. It was a journey. I can only imagine. He was saying all the things. He was the wise sage. He was just brilliant king. And then 700 wives, 300 concubines. He did not use wisdom over his own life. He could speak wisdom about so many things, but he didn't use wisdom over his own life. What's interesting, you heard about how many proverbs he spoke. And historians say that Solomon wrote most of Proverbs. I always think of it as David writing it, but it wasn't. Solomon writing most of Proverbs. But he also wrote Ecclesiastes as he got old. And Ecclesiastes is one of those chapters that just is like, why even bother? Why even do a thing? Why even? And when you look up what is the main message of Ecclesiastes, it says that only God is eternal. All the rest of it passes away. That is the primary message of it. And it was written by Solomon. And we know that, yes, that's true to a point. But when you've done what you're not supposed to do, you lose hope in everything. And that's really where Solomon ended up, which is just such a shame because, you know, it was written in his lifetime, which means all that wisdom that he was sharing. And then to get to the end and just be like, I mean, serious, why even bother? Is where Ecclesiastes goes. I'm not looking forward to reading that chapter in my chapter a day. I want to get through it quickly. But anyway, that is the journey of Solomon. And so I'm going to bring my beautiful sisters on screen and ask, was there anything that I shared tonight that was new to you that you hadn't heard before? Hi, Spring.
So I actually have not studied Solomon. I didn't realize it got stupid.
Oh,
And yeah, I don't remember that. I don't remember that about Solomon. But I also, as we now know, we know that he was dreaming. He only dreamed that that's what God told him. My next question is that, did he ever really receive all the wisdom that he dreamed about? Because God had said, didn't he say, like, you can have all this if you obey me and follow me? Or was he just saying that about long life? Did he say that his wisdom his wisdom had a but had a
the wisdom didn't have the but. It didn't. It says, I will give you a wise and discerning heart. This is in chapter 3. I will give you a wise and discerning heart so that there will never have been anyone like you, nor will there ever be. Moreover, I will give you what you have not asked for, both riches and honor, so that in your lifetime, you will have no equal among kings. And then verse 14 of chapter 3 says, and if you walk in my ways and obey my statutes and commands as David your father did, I will give you a long life.
Okay, so really it's only in reference to long life.
Yeah. And I wonder if long life is not just the years, but the legacy of the ruling, the kingship, long life, that your name will continue on. I mean, it still does, but in terms of his sons and saying, I'm gonna take it out of your son's hand, kind of thing. Like, is that part of the long life that did not occur because of that?
Yeah.
The kingdom didn't have his kingdom didn't have a long life. He was able to keep it till he died. He said, I'm not going to do it while you're alive, but I will do it.
But probably by the time he died, though, he wasn't known as being all wise, all knowing.
I wonder.
I would think that, I mean, if it says that his concubines turned him, and
people must have noticed that.
Well,
yeah.
Jean is talking, but we can't hear, and you're not muted, so you must be muted on your. She just talked. Ow.
She's trying to fix it. She don't know what to do. Figuring it out.
Yeah, usually, I just know she's not on her headset. A lot of times she's usually on her headset.
Can you hear me now?
Yuppers.
All right.
Yuppers?
So we were taught in lay ministry that there was.
You're super quiet, super light.
Super quiet. Okay, let me see if I can turn it up a little bit. Okay, testing. Let me look.
Okay, you're muted. Okay, now I'm unmuted. Now what?
I'm testing my output.
That's a little better.
It's a little better.
Okay, how about that?
That's a little better.
Okay, what about that?
That's better.
Great.
Okay, all right. So it's the microphone input, not output. Okay, got it. I don't know why Zoom decides to just dial you back. It's like, no, big mouth. We're just, okay. So anyway, yeah, we were taught in lay ministry school that there was a question by the end of Solomon's life, not of whether he was still wise, but whether he was still saved. Because, I mean, although saved wouldn't have been the
right.
term, right?
They wouldn't have called it that.
Right. Not before Jesus, right? But whether he was still a man of faith. And so, because yeah, Ecclesiastes is the most hopeless book perhaps I have ever read in my life. It is hopeless. I mean, it goes beyond God is eternal. It goes to, and the rest of us are worth two dead flies all mashed up. Why bother? And I'm like, okay. But it's interesting that that it talks about how his wives turned him, and we all know people who are really smart, except when it comes to love, and just get all messed up and turned around and will make all the wrong choices as a result of their heart. He clearly had a weakness for the ladies. I don't know what you do with 1,000 of anything. Like, just like that's more than two. You got it.
700 wives and 300 concubines.
If you were trying to service all of them, what is that? 3 a day? 3.5? I just
That must just be he was acquiring them over a lifetime. Like that was mine. Boom, bam. Thank you, ma'am. Throw them out and never see them again. Who knows?
he said he loved them.
Yeah,
You did say you loved them. Spring, now your volume went down. I don't know what happened.
Oh, really? Well, you know,
I can hear Spring.
yeah. But
Yeah, at the end of 11, at the end of chapter 11, it says in verses 41 and through 43, as for the other events of Solomon's reign, all he did and the wisdom he displayed, are they not written in the book of the annals of Solomon? Solomon reigned in Jerusalem over all Israel 40 years. Then he rested with his fathers and was buried in the city of David, his father. And Rehoboam, his son, succeeded him as king. But then the next chapter says Israel rebels against Rehoboam. So just that fast, whole thing was done. Yes, that means he didn't care about their color or nationality. I see that about the strange women, the foreign women.
yeah.
And yes, and then Retnu, it wasn't even that they were foreign. It was that they served other gods. That was the part that God was like, don't yoke yourself with them because you're going to follow their gods. And I'm telling you don't want to do that. So
Yeah.
retinue, Gina, let me know. It's a group of advisors, assistants, or others accompanying an important person.
So like entourage, but maybe with a little more credibility than entourage.
Right, like whoever
not
travels.
Not just hanging honors. Yeah.
Yeah.
Entourage with gold flakes.
Right, exactly. Entourage with blueberries is what it is. Yep. So
Yeah.
Solomon is an interesting story to me because his wisdom is sometimes you wonder if you can know too much.
Right. You're smarter.
You're too
You
smart.
think you're smarter than you are.
Or you're too smart for your own good.
Smart
Not
for your
even
own
that.
good. What'd you say,
Yeah.
honey?
I was saying, I was agreeing with sister saying not even like too smart for your own good is what I think about.
Smarter than you know how to handle. Like, you know what I mean? Like, I know that I have to filter what I watch, what I let in, because I know that I'm not really built to handle it. And I just wonder if you can just be too smart for your own good. It's just, it's like that scene at the end of Batman with the, it was, oh gosh, what's his
Are
name?
you sure it's Batman or is it Indiana Jones?
It's Batman. And it's,
Because Indiana Jones had a scene like that too.
but it had, oh, I can't remember his name. It's
Michael
the guy
Keaton?
the one who played the mask.
And the Joker?
He wasn't a Joker. Who played the mask? Carrey.
Oh,
Jim Carrey.
Mm-hmm.
Jim Carrey. It was the one that he was in, and he had hooked it up so that all the knowledge was coming into his head from all different places in Gotham. Like his head turned. Yeah, it was bad. It was more than anybody could handle.
I must not have seen that one. I don't remember that. Okay.
Anyway,
I can't remember that either. I do remember in the Indiana Jones that has Kate Blanchett. That was exactly what was going on. She was saying, I want to know. It's the one that had aliens. It really bothered me because, I think of Indiana Jones as historic. And so then doing, aliens and whatnot, that didn't make me happy. It jumped the shark. But she's standing in this room, this tomb or whatever. And there are all these alien things around her. And she's asking them to give her all the knowledge. I think her head blew up at the end, if I remember correctly.
Jim Carrey was the Riddler, in this
Yes,
one. And
the
it was
Riddler,
Batman
yes.
Forever. It was
Little
Batman Forever.
Lewis.
I
Yes.
see him as a Riddler. I don't think I saw that. Makes sense that he would be.
Yeah. But, and then I think about the Tower of Babel and how God is like, nope, they don't need it.
Yeah,
They
they
don't
do
need it.
this is gonna be a problem.
They're gonna rival us in what they know, and they don't know how to handle
Won't
it,
be
and
able
they
to
do,
tell them nothing.
and they'll do the bad things with it. And that's the part
Yeah.
that is interesting to me, is that knowledge doesn't mitigate the inclination to do the wrong thing, or you know what I mean? Knowledge doesn't necessarily mean self-control.
That's
Right.
true.
It's just,
Yeah, yeah,
That you'll make the best choices.
yeah.
and it doesn't override your emotions. Knowledge doesn't override your emotions most of the time. That was the thing that when we were in Mensa and we ran into so many racists, and I was like, how can you be so smart and still be racist? And then I realized that racism wasn't a head thing, it was a heart thing. And knowledge can't overpower that. So
That's true. That's true. That's so true. Yeah. It makes you think about, you could teach a 5-year-old how to turn the stove on.
bad idea.
Right. But with the knowledge of, I know exactly how to turn this on, it doesn't necessarily mean they'll have the wisdom to know when to, when not to. And even if they know, don't turn this on because you might get burned. So they've got the wisdom and know that, like you said, it still doesn't change. You know what? I just want to see what happens if I, set my toys on fire. Like it doesn't mean self-control. It doesn't override the heart. I mean, it takes discipline to operate in wisdom. You can spout wisdom all day long, but operating in it is a whole other thing.
Yeah, that's the whole do what I say kind of thing, not as I do, because it is. And I don't know if he didn't ask God for self-discipline. He asked for discernment, wisdom, and without that other part.
That's so interesting. I've been thinking a lot about, well, what you just said about knowledge does not override the heart, but I've just been thinking about, for whatever reason, about kids and how I'm wondering about at what point, at what age. I'd really love to know what's going on in their brain when they start realizing race, because they don't know race, which is just phenomenal. I think because we've got so many little ones now that are my great greats, and they don't recognize race. They just say, oh, Penny's pink, and and so-and-so's white, and so-and-so's beige, and so-and-so's brown, and so-and-so's chocolate. I mean, they don't know race. They just know when people start talking colors, they see colors.
Right, they know their colors. They learn their colors early.
They don't see race. And it just, I saw this little exchange going on, with my niece, one of my baby niece, who's actually, she's an 80-year-old trapped in a 4-year-old body. But just seeing her and talking amongst her friends and stuff like that. And it just made me wonder about at what point they start to understand that people are talking about race versus skin color.
Yeah.
Actual skin color. And then the development, because I think it's probably a little bit later that they start associating things with race. Not becoming racist, but just at what point they start connecting that people are talking about. Because when they're really little, there's just no way.
No. They're young.
Confusing to them that people, it's got to be so confusing if they do, unfortunately, have to catch the news or people talking. Or I imagine when George Floyd was going on, a lot of people had to have conversations with their babies. They were like, I don't even know how do you talk to a 4-year-old, 5-year-old who's asking about this. And then a 6 or 7 or 8-year-old, and probably by about 8, I'm sure they're understanding. That's where they're starting to understand it. But anyway, I've just been thinking about that a lot, is that knowledge versus the heart condition.
Yeah. They say you have to teach racism, but it's different than just teaching.
Than just teaching.
It is instilling an emotion, and
Right.
a child about someone. Yeah, Penny calls people who aren't brown or who, yeah, brownless.
Brownless, people who are,
Brownless. They're brownless. Yeah, they're brownless.
oh, okay.
Yeah. So, and she's 7. I don't think she really understands anything beyond, any of the underpinning of anything. It's just they're brownless. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, and
Yeah.
we've
Wow.
had this period of time where children weren't in class weren't in, during that developmental age where they're not learning, they're not around a bunch of other kids and stuff like that for at least 2 years, right? From 2020 to like 22 when they started getting back around people. But that's an extremely developmental age, those early years there. And if they're not being introduced to or just being around other kids and that and just within their household, um, I think it really affects them. And I think we're not done seeing the effect of that. I think we're seeing it a little bit, we're seeing it in the older kids that they call COVID graduates. We're seeing it in the older high school kids, but I don't think we're seeing it yet in what happened with those really early developmental.
It's interesting because even if when kids are little, even when they come across something that is different, their first response is typically not fear. I don't, you know
Right.
what I mean? Like if they can recognize it as an entity, as a person. Have you seen that meme where this giant monster thing is following a little 2 or 3 year old around? It's like
Yeah.
somebody in a giant costume, and she turns around and she looks at it and she's like, "Huh." And then she's like, "This is my new friend," kind of thing. I remember going to a place in Michigan camping with a friend, and it was a place where I don't think there were any black people in the county. And we went to the grocery store, and a little kid came around the corner and saw me, and his little eyes were like saucers, and he wasn't scared, but he was like, "Mom!" He goes, I guess he was going to just tell her, look what I found. There's been a sighting. So anyway, but yeah, but he wasn't afraid. That I don't think that's. I think again, you have to teach kids to associate race with being afraid. So.
Yep, without a doubt. I just saw a reel where there was like a baby bear that was coming. There was a child and his parent, I think maybe both parents, on a porch, and it was raised. And there was a baby bear toward the bottom who was trying to get its paws in between the slats of the porch. And the child pulled away, like, "I want to pet the doggy." And they snatched the baby bear. No, 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 no. Do not pet the doggy. And
Right.
like you said, they're not even scared. It's just something new. It looks sort of familiar. It's an animal on 4 legs with fur, so it's a dog. And yeah, they snatched the baby back. But you know,
Yeah.
we are trained in terms of how we feel about things. So there's no question. Jean, you made a really good point that Solomon asked for um and received a discerning heart in administering justice. That's what he asked for. He wanted discernment, but he wanted to know how to rule God's people. But you're right. He didn't ask, and myself,
Yeah.
I want to have the wisdom and discernment to
And
make
self-discipline.
and self-discipline to make good choices. Even if you have the wisdom and discernment to make good choices, even in thinking of it inward versus help me know how to rule your people, but also if you said and rule myself, have the discernment for both, distinguishing between right and wrong. I just wonder what would have happened, how it would have been different. So yeah, too smart
I
for your own
definitely
good.
I'll look at, you said, what have we learned that we didn't know? I'll look at Solomon totally differently now. I think that I honestly believe that well, I missed a lot of Sunday school. We know that because I'm late all the time. So, but I absolutely missed like the teachings on that somewhere in my studies. All I've ever known is the wisdom of Solomon, the wisdom of Solomon. And then later on, because you pointed out that that was a dream, he was still very, very wise, but he had dreamed this particular part that's often taught as if it's not a dream. But I've never known that he ended up basically giving away a lot of his power because although he ruled his people, he couldn't rule himself, or he didn't rule himself very well.
Exactly.
But it wasn't a dream as in like a dream in his own head. It was more like God came to him in a dream. I mean,
Yes.
it was really
God came
God
to him.
talking to him.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
God came to him in a dream.
Yeah, but and the way but it's been taught, at least from most of my life, I remember it being taught. Not that God, just that God spoke to him, not that it was in a
Exactly.
Oh, not that it was while he was asleep.
right,
Mhm.
right.
Yeah, it says at Gibeon, the Lord appeared to Solomon during the night in a dream, and God said, ask for whatever you want me to give you. So yes, it was God came to him in a dream. So, but there are other places where, like in chapter 6, when he's building the temple, God says, because he's figuring out, yeah, I think we need to do this and do that, and it needs to be this by that. And he's doing all of this. And then the word of the Lord came to Solomon, as for this temple you are building, if you follow my decrees, carry out my regulations, and keep all my commands and obey them, I will fulfill through you the promise I gave to David your father, and I will live among the Israelites and will not abandon my people Israel. So when he's saying, you didn't do what I told you to do, and he references where he says, God says, since this is your attitude and you have not kept my covenant and my decrees, which I commanded you. So I was noticing that he had talked to him multiple times. So yes, he first came to him in a dream, but there were other times he was like, you want to know what to do about this? Yes, you can build that. Yes, you can do that. Like he was communing with him, and he's like, I told you though. Like we had a relationship. What happened? So anyway, it, like I said, when I get to 12 or 11 rather, and it starts with but King Solomon, or King Solomon, however, that just you already know it's going downhill from here. It's like he was doing he was so wise, wiser than anybody ever and will ever be, and he was richer than anybody in his lifetime. But King Solomon, like you just it just goes downhill. So it's just such a shame. Yeah, exactly. Dang. So anyway, yep, the journey, wisdom and the journey of Solomon. That's tonight's title. So, anyway, but I didn't know about that whole talking about the plants and the animals. Had you ever read that, Jean? Do you remember that?
Probably. I did have to read the whole thing. I'm not surprised that he, because in Ecclesiastes he talks about so many things. So, to botany and biology and chemistry, all of that. I'm not surprised that, yeah, he would know all of that. And of course, he lived a long time and he was wise and smart, not just wise, but smart, right? So I'm sure he was insatiable and wanted to learn all the things. So we don't hear about Solomon as a great scholar in actual history. We only really hear about him in the Bible. But then I just, they're not sure that Queen of Sheba was a real person, but the historians are trying to figure out queens were not, supposedly she's from Ethiopia and Egypt. The area of Ethiopia, Sana, I think is where they said she was from, or something like that anyway. But they're like, well, we can't determine if there really was a Queen of Sheba. They're just, You know
what I have to say about that?
I know.
Yeah. So yeah, when they draw things in Egypt and the pharaohs and all of that, they were all olive skinned or whatever.
Oh no, yes, but they're not contesting whether she was a black woman who came. You know what I mean? Ethiopians are pretty much black. The concept of her is contested. So whether a person of that type even existed. So anyway, we need to look at it a little closer.
What's the one that had all the Netflix stuff this year that they were arguing about whether not they know that she was queen, but they were.
Was it Cleopatra?
Was it Cleopatra? Because they were trying to say she was basically European. And, even though she, yeah, I didn't.
I love all these Egyptian people. These people from Africa. No, we call them.
And so
Mhm.
they wanted to, almost like when Dearborn used to be all white and they wanted to cut it out. They wanted to separate it from Detroit and all. So they just want to say like, no, 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 this little part here, this actually belongs to Europe. So anyway.
That's really interesting, especially as we see Disney in particular adding diversity to characters, and Disney and beyond, adding diversity to characters and people, and the backlash that they're facing as a
Huge.
result of that. Which is funny because Jesus. I think we should just hold up a picture of Jesus whenever anybody starts to talk about.
Except the picture they hold up is not the picture of Jesus.
That's what I'm talking about. Y'all had a white person play the role of Jesus almost from the beginning, and I think we get as many roles as we want now.
With the imaginary people, with the people.
Right.
Right? Why is
You
there a
know,
black mermaid?
with the
Mermaids aren't
mermaid.
black. Wait, mermaids aren't real. So
Santa Claus is white.
You
yeah,
So anyway,
It
I'm going to
is
hold up
really-
my picture of a white person playing the role of Jesus whenever anybody complains to me about any brown person playing any role.
yeah.
Yeah.
No, I know it's really ridiculous. But I remember somebody telling me they had gone to Egypt and going through all of the where the all the things are. They could not believe that what they've been taught is not what it actually looks like. They're
Right.
like, everybody's brown. Like everything that's built and the pictures and the drawings and like they're all brown and full lips. And I'm just like, okay.
Aren't you in Africa?
But they don't expect it. They just don't expect it. It's so, for whatever reason, it's so easier for them to accept the paradigm, that European paradigm, even when you like take Ethiopian people. I mean, who of course are all the shades of the rainbow, but they lock onto the certain lightest, the most European looking Ethiopian person.
Yeah.
And they go, because for some reason there's I don't know which group that they have very light eyes, like blue and green eyes, stuff like that. There's some pretty people, but they like to lock on and really, try to celebrate this, what they consider to be beautiful, and because it's closest to European features. But it's like just going to ignore all the rest of the people.
Wow.
Okay. Con, you're still recording. Because you're okay. What is she doing? Oh, she muted.
I muted because my phone rang.
Because your phone rang.
Yes,
Oh,
but
yeah.
I'm gonna sign off now for real. So
For real. Well,
For
this
real,
was
for
a
real.
great lesson tonight. Thank you for teaching me what I didn't know.
oh, praise God. Praise God. He's, every time, every Bible study, I learn something new. So anyway, all right, ladies, I will talk to you soon. I love you. Bye,
Love you.
Facebook.
Bye-bye.